the things that need to be implemented in order to deliver against the 10-year strategy. So accelerating project delivery is one. And they offer a number of steps on that. You're absolutely right. Embracing AI first, infrastructure delivery, and then the one that raised eyebrows. Kind of you would expect, yes, let's build faster, and you would think AI is going to be part of that. But yeah, the unlocking private investment really, that was the bit that raised my eyebrow the most.
Hello and welcome back to Construction Disrupted. I am here with the ever-present Ryan Jones. Ryan, how are you doing?
Well, I'm reasonably okay. I mean, you can tell for anyone watching on YouTube, particularly my two sons, they keep wondering why they can see Daddy in the kitchen and also on the TV. I'm not in my usual orange office, and I'm down south in glamorous London, but not as glamorous as your last week, Mr. Sumter. I don't know if you want to share with the listeners where you've been.
Yeah. Went to United States for a bit of a shindig with Adobe, as you do. That's kind of a plug, although I'm probably going to have to do the ambassador ad just to make it abundantly clear that I am affiliated with them. But there's no pressure because there's no advertising here. Other creative platforms are available, I must say. But yeah, amazing stuff coming out of Adobe. As with other creative platforms, I am sure a lot of good AI capabilities and things that will help the creative process rather than take it away from creatives, which is great. And from an AI perspective, I think that's where we ended last week's show, I think, in some round, guys. We certainly mentioned it. So I think it's apparent we should start this week with AI.
I think difficult not to do one of these things and kind of not mention AI at the minute. It is, as we'll get into in all three of our headlines for this week. It's omnipresent. I think one of the good things, in fairness, the other thing that is omnipresent, and we did touch on this previously, was uncertainty in market brought about by the impending Chancellor's budget, which has been absolutely everywhere. I normally do my sort of roundup on LinkedIn on a Friday, and just elected not to this week. There was so much kind of doom and gloom. I know that we said we'll get behind the headlines and try and find some other things that are going on that may be of interest to people. But I'm grateful for AI this week. It's given us three other topics to get stuck into.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to start with the first one?
Well, yeah, I guess ground zero for all of this is skills. One of the things that we've been talking about is obviously skills gap. We touched upon some of the initiatives, including what's happening in the West Midlands on more entrance into market, filling the labour gap end of things. I guess, not to say that's not skilled. But part of the debate that you and I were having was on the kinds of skills that people are learning. Great that people are on the practical. I think roofing was mentioned, and finishing and interiors and bricklaying and so on. And Lord knows that we need those things. But I guess to give a more rounded education based on where the sector is clearly going to, whether AI needed to be a core part of that, people understanding planning tools and so on. And what do you know? We were clearly onto something, as detailed in a new report from Skills England this week, led by Royal Holloway, University of London, Dr. Nisreen Amin. They've laid out 10 sort of key areas under the AI skills for the UK workforce, which is about upskilling the existing workforce and also preparing market entrants for what the construction sector and the built environment sectors are going to look like as we go forward. So they break down into a couple of key areas, but really, really timely, actually. And again, it's not that you and I are geniuses and saw this coming, of course, but I'm really, really encouraging that when we're talking skills, we're not just talking numbers game, we're thinking about where those people are going to be deployed strategically within the industry. And then the skills that we're expecting those people to have and that we think are going to take the industry forward are broader than just the kind of hands-on trade skills that are so often spoken about. I don't know if you've had a chance to get stuck into this report yet.
Yeah, a little bit top level while I've been away skimming certain things, and as you do when you're in a hotel room, slightly jet lagged and tired. But that's enough about my jollies. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I suppose, like everything we cover, it's interesting. But with AI, it's so raw and so new that trying to put some form of framework around it and identify skills and abilities and what people need to focus on is quite tricky, because what we could have had this conversation 6 months ago and it would have been a completely different conversation. But I think the fundamentals for what they're trying to do is correct here in terms of guiding organizations through AI adoption and helping businesses assess if they're actually ready for AI. And it's that foundational piece that I think is massively important. And when you look at the headline, if you like, of helping UK businesses fill a £400 billion AI skills gap, it seems a phenomenal, insurmountable number. But I think it's small steps for everybody, and it's getting that for to utilize something that they've said, that framework correct, rather than looking at, oh, you need to use this and you need to use that. Understand what its capabilities are first and how it fits within your organization.
And that's what I was going to say. That I'm completely with you. I think obviously what this needs to achieve and the financial numbers and the societal impact enormous. And I think we've spoken about this before. You can freeze in the face of that and end up just doing nothing. But also, we talk about the kind of construction supply chain. It's actually a number of discrete supply chains, isn't it? That all add up to one, very complex sort of network of things within a sector. So there's another big complexity. The other one is when you say AI, how intimidating that is for some people, particularly where, we spoke about this in the context of the Barber report, where there are people that are less confident with technology anyway and don't understand the benefits and are intimidated by what they believe is coming rightly or wrongly. So for those that haven't read the report, I think what it does really well to sort of answer that, to use a word that you use, Peter, it provides a pretty easy, digestible framework to start to think about these things, if not in sequence, to at least kind of compartmentalize them and deal with them on their own. So the report breaks down kind of three areas that you can group these things into. So the first one's technical AI skills. So there's a couple of examples around use of drones for site mapping, for example. Data extraction from BIM systems. Obviously, BIM is something that has been championed for north of a decade now. But do people fully understand, what's coming back out of that system and how to use that within their roles? And AI-supported project planning tools. We can keep shouting about people need to be AI ready. What does that actually mean? And should we, ironically, should we be using AI to make it easier for people to be onboarded with that stuff? So that technical skills is one bucket of stuff. The second is non-technical skills, so interpreting AI outputs and applying that to on-site decisions. So, where people have, an agentic approach, I guess, to project management, someone then needs to be able to be skilled enough in interpreting that to then apply that to, a schedule of works on site, for example, or, how you manage your kind of manifests of goods coming to site, etc. There is still the need for someone that isn't technical in an AI sense, but is technical in their role to be able to actually make that useful in a practical sense on site. And then the third, which I love that this has been part of the consideration. It's something that is becoming a wider conversation in general terms on AI. Responsible and ethical AI competencies. So the environmental impact, obviously, it's construction that rightly is bound to be there. But the ethical use of surveillance tools such as site monitoring. So if we're using things like drones on site, for example, how do we use that ethically, and what is the purpose of that, and how are we going to manage that data afterwards? And then inclusive design thinking into sustainability oriented projects. It's I love that is part of the sort of baked in thinking within this. And then as these things get adopted, and hopefully they do, let's hope that stays the course right the way through the process.
Yeah, it's those forgotten things in AI. It's not just about that implementation. It's like the ethical connotations, the legal connotations, the things that organizations normally would think about, but sometimes you can lose your heads with these newer technologies and forget of those particular elements, which are absolutely crucial. My only reservation to all this is the step, I personally feel the step before that, and that's that resistance or skepticism around AI and implementing it. Because, as we know, being marketers, humans are lazy, they don't like change, and we have that resistance, and particularly when things that can be seen as complex or quite difficult to understand, that makes it even harder to remove that skepticism. But uh, going back to what we were saying last week on episode 89, check it out, about marketing within construction from a strategic level. Really interesting chat with me and Ryan Jones. Again, that's the advert, right?
That's the plug.
That's the paid promotion that right there. But I think what I've lost my train of thought there. But the point being that I feel we're already using it, as we discussed, and
Mm-hmm.
most people will already be using it. They just don't know it. So that skepticism and that resistance, it should be easily broken down if we focus on, you are actually using it, you just don't know it, and it's not as harmful or dangerous as you might think it is. So there's a whole, like I said, it's been done for the right reasons. I just think the framing of it needs to be bang on to get the majority within construction on board for this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, and then there's a couple of things in that, isn't there? I think back to the purpose of the report, I think embedding this into training and onboarding and kind of having, I guess, as those new entrants into market have this just as part of their onboarding toolkit, then the sector is kind of dragged along to maturity on some of those things. I also think that the biggest accelerant is always, can we show some positive use cases, particularly those that have had a positive commercial impact on those businesses? I think, you can call me a cynic, but barriers start to come down at that point where people can see the use case for it. I think at the minute you say AI to a lot of people, even those that consciously have adopted it, it's ChatGPT, it's OpenAI, as we've discussed previously. So again, showing these more practical applications for and use cases for where this will work in your business, I think is a real winner. And yeah, as I say, the fact that the ethics point is being discussed from the start rather than something that we sleepwalk into and then have to course correct afterwards.
Yeah.
I think, well done to everyone involved in that report. I think it's the recommendations are really, really solid, and I'll be fascinated to see how that plays out.
Just a quick, before we move on, just a quick shout out to somebody. He's been on the podcast in its previous carnation before. A chap called Alistair Lewis, and he does a really, really good job in breaking down AI and tools and Contech in what he does. And on LinkedIn particularly, he did share specific jobs within AI. He highlights relative tools and elements like that specifically within construction. So give him a follow, Alistair Lewis on LinkedIn, because he does a really good job of demystifying a lot of construction technology, particularly AI. So I thought I'd throw that one in there.
Yeah, no, certain.
Okay, right. Let's move on slightly, and ever so slightly. Let's focus on infrastructure, something which I don't think we've done yet.
I think we fleetingly mentioned super projects, but I think it's definitely due. It's due some focus from us, I think.
Absolutely. So this is Rebuilding Britain, the UK's 10-year infrastructure strategy. So Ryan, introduce us to this one.
Well, in particular, I wanted to focus on. I think again, lots of headlines in the last couple of weeks on the strategy itself, which was long overdue. I think again, some of the key things people will be well aware of, and I think we've discussed previously actually as well. The introduction of new runways at Heathrow and building out our sort of airport capacity is a big one. There's a lot of the sort of regionally devolved rail projects kind of knitting together into one bigger piece as well as the the usual sort of motorway infrastructure pieces. But I wanted to focus on a response from industry to that. Okay. Again, these things don't work if it's just a diktat from government and it either happens or doesn't invariably, as we touched upon with other reports in previous weeks. But AECOM, someone, and again, to give another shout out on the show, one of their analysts, Pablo Christivorm, is someone that I follow on LinkedIn and keep an eye on. There was their Q4 report that we've referenced previously called a sticky situation that I'd highly recommend in terms of where they see the sector coming in the immediate term. But they produced a 10-point response to the national infrastructure strategy. And the reason I like it, we talk about collaboration a lot. that yeah, if these things are going to get implemented, there has to be some input and some impetus from sector as to, okay, you want this. We think it's a good idea as well. However, here's some things to consider. And the way that they've looked at it is, what are the, and this is a word, so forgive me, but the implementable pieces that government and industry can put in place to facilitate, these things. They're gargantuan projects by their nature. You've touched on super projects previously, and the potential that they have, not just to unlock things economically, but to create a more positive narrative generally for the sector if we can stick the landing and deliver on them. So here's a practical, about 10 practical steps that could be introduced to make sure that those things don't just become positive headlines, but they actually come to fruition. They're going to take years and years to get here. So how do we speed up that process as much as possible?
Yeah, for sure. So what this 10-year strategy, it's all about resilience, and I mean decarbonisation obviously gets a mention, and then back to our old friend digital, and enabling infrastructure from an AI perspective, and having that almost baked in, or certainly leveraging it to optimize project delivery, and a whole host of things that you mentioned about upskilling as well. One thing it does cover is looking at private investment as well, which is an interesting one. So that mixture of public and private partnerships, which I don't know what your take on that is. It could go one way, it could go another for me personally, when you start to mix public and private. Depending on, I suppose, who's in charge, eh? But let's not go there.
No,
But yeah,
it's
what's
an
your take?
interesting one. It's a very, very interesting one. I think there's some decent examples of where that's being done well. However, for anyone that's been in the sector for some time, as soon as you mention PFI, there are so many negative examples to be sort of brought to mind, particularly the PFI scandal and everything else that happened there with it, the hospital investment program and so on. Fans of it will point to what was actually built and what the output was, but then people that have an eye on the economics of things will look at what the true cost actually was to the taxpayer funding those things. I think, in fairness, AECOM have to jump back a step, they've done the same sort of breaking things down to three broad buckets. Pardon me. In terms of the things that need to be implemented in order to deliver against the 10-year strategy. So accelerating project delivery is one. And they offer a number of steps on that. You're absolutely right. Embracing AI first infrastructure delivery, and then the one that raised eyebrows. Kind of you would expect, yes, let's build faster, and you would think AI is going to be part of that. But yeah, the unlocking private investment really, that was the bit that raised my eyebrow the most. However, they're not quite saying bring back PFI in its current guise. Their number one policy recommendation in that particular subset is reimagining public-private partnerships. It's in. Well, let's see if there's an appetite for that. I think everything up to that point in the report, you kind of nod along and go, absolute no-brainer. I think one of the big ones, I think, and my opinions on this, it irks me massively that this isn't the case. But having a dedicated minister for infrastructure, if this is important enough to warrant a 10-year strategy, and it's important enough that end client, government as end client rather. Why haven't we got someone that is a named representative? I know we've touched on the last cabinet reshuffle. Who was the contact for that, but it's not the same as having a dedicated minister, is it?
No.
Yeah, I'm stunned that one's not there. But you've got a named person there to manage that whole PFI bit. It's an interesting one.
As two competent marketers, or let's say marketers, or at least one competent marketer, it's two competent marketers. We'll leave it to the audience to decide. No, let's not go there. No, that's going to end terribly. But as a marketer, do you ever want to hear the word reimagining in a strategic document?
No, but in fairness to AECOM, I'm calling this a strategic document might be a bit of a stretch as well. I think the recommendation itself is only a couple of paragraphs. Again, you could be. I wouldn't be. I think, as I say, I think this is a decent starting point in response to a pretty in-depth thing from government. But yeah, I'm with you. In fairness, reimagining. we're airing personal biases here. The PFI thing makes me a bit. Well, I'd actually they've used PPP, haven't they? Public-private partnership, which feels like a bit of a rebrand for PFI.
Mhm.
But yeah, as I say, everything else I kind of nod along with until I get to that point, and I think, yeah, that needs a fair bit of detail behind it. But I think the guys at Acon will be the first ones to say that that's maybe not the purpose of um, this particular document, is it?
Yeah, and one takeaway that kind of led to a bigger question was unlocking efficiencies such as co-locating data centers
Mm.
um, with other infrastructure elements. But then that raises the question of, is this strategy going to be focused enough on a region by region level, and there's less bias towards certain areas of the country than there are others? You know, we've spoken about Northern Powerhouse and all that kind of jazz, and I don't want to drag that back up. But if this is an infrastructure for Britain, then surely there's got to be that dispersion, which makes it fair and just for all
Yeah,
regions.
yeah, for certain. I think that was one, and again, talk about no brainer. That was another one of the recommendations in there on that subject that I thought was absolutely, why aren't we already doing this? But this idea of kind of systems integration in that respect, that it is a truly national response to infrastructure requirement. Maybe that's where that public-private element comes back in as well.
Yeah,
In order to make something investable, there has to be something in it for private sector, which is where that imbalance maybe comes in.
yeah,
But yeah, the idea that you would invest in a pretty sizable piece of infrastructure with a hefty price tag and not have that connected to other bits of infrastructure as part of your overall systems thinking. Yeah, it's slightly mind blowing that we're not already working that way. So yeah, hopefully that's
yeah.
one of the things that gets implemented. On that, I reached out to Pablo just to get a bit of sort of insight from him. My question to him was that these things look great, but they look so great that to that point I kind of asked myself why we haven't been doing this kind of thing sooner. Um, and the nature of infrastructure projects, a lot of the noise around Heathrow, particularly,
Mm,
this needs some wins, it needs some positivity. But you have to take a pragmatic view that these things don't pay off for decades in some cases, or in the case of the Northern leg of HS2, they don't at all, even where there is cross-party consensus. Um, so what can be implemented quickly enough that it still helps to deliver on a 10-year strategy, but is delivered quickly enough that the sector and the public at large feel like we've had some wins. And he said, by way of response on that there are for certain some quick wins in the recommendations they've
okay.
made. Obviously, back to the previous story, the AI use of AI to build capability and to build capacity within the system. That is a fairly straightforward thing. Yes, there's elements of
Mhm,
upskilling as we've touched on, but in broad terms, that's already happening now. So having a formal kind of accelerant as part of that can be done, and also stakeholder collaboration as well. Back to that point of, this isn't
mhm.
happening to communities, it's not happening to the regions, but having those interested parties involved in that from the start and having them have an input rather than just this is happening. Yeah, again, it's a fairly straightforward thing. You kind of go, well, we should be doing that anyway. But yeah, if those things can be brought into the system and just made matter of course, then yeah, without making any huge changes, those can start to have an impact straight away. So yeah, encouraging that this could be implemented.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, seeing is believing, and it's that quick win for a longer term gain, and you don't want to be hand to mouth all the time. But as with all these things, when it's such a long period of time, it's easy for
Mm.
a large group of people to become skeptical, and then that devalues what they're trying to do, and it makes it harder. So,
Well, yeah,
I,
we've seen before, as I say, even where there has been, an obvious need for something, cross-party consensus for it, pardon the pun, but it can get derailed so quickly by
mhm,
public opinion. You've got
mhm.
a lot of politicians that will be thinking parliament to parliament rather than thinking in 10-year sort of
Yeah,
national impact cycles. Um, so yeah, it's one where you probably need some short-term wins to get you to end goal rather than thinking purely in sort of terms of
mhm,
a 10-year period. So hopefully there are some quick wins for them to implement because it would be to the benefit of us all if it did happen.
yeah, absolutely. So, do you want to move on to the final story? And we'll talk about AI.
Yeah, well, talk about AI for a change. Speaking of for a change, I think how nice was it to actually talk about marketing a little bit last week, getting to
Yeah,
nerd out
it did.
on some of that stuff.
I felt like I could loosen a few notches on my belt. I don't know why. I just
Yeah.
felt.
No, but in fairness, I've had some good feedback on that as well. So I think, yeah, I'm keen to make sure we get that balance right, I guess, between construction and
Yeah.
marketing. And one of the things that we mentioned on there last week within we mentioned within the Barber ABI, the case for marketing investment in the built environment report. And please go and access and read at your leisure if you haven't already. But one of the questions in there was what would you do with unlimited budget? And we focused on the sort of things that people came up with first, and rightly so. Investment in their team and investment in infrastructure and so on. Advertising came out pretty low in that. I
Mm,
think I've got the report here. 6% of people said that if they had more money, they'd invest in advertising. And actually, a report that came out also last week, I think, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, but hit the headlines last week, was on a heavyweight piece of research by our friend Les Burnett and Will Davis at MediaCom.
mm,
That actually advertising is effects of advertising are eightfold compared to other parts of the marketing mix, and therefore we probably should be focusing on ad spend a little bit more.
mm.
But I have good news in that respect. In that the latest numbers are out from the Advertising Association and from Walk. And total advertising spend for the UK is up for the year to a horrifically high amount, 11.3 billion for the first half of the year. Oh, but sorry, forgive me. That was quarter two. For half one was 22 billion. What's 11 billion between friends, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
But it then a slightly strange sort of one for our world. It's our industry that's the fastest growing. Industrial advertising, which we get lumped into, yeah, registered a growth of
Mm.
1.8 for the first half of the year, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, marketers doing the right thing within our part of the world, which yeah, go us.
Yeah, absolutely. I always read these numbers and figures. I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer here, far from it. I've just, I've looked behind the curtain far too many times, and some of the things that the key drivers they gave was our friend AI again
Mhm.
in investing in there, and that goes with it. Online platforms being used and VOD as well, video on demand, which is I think the shining light that as a let's just call it construction. Um,
Mhm.
we're utilizing these things that are seen as beneficial to communicate to your audience and be front of mind and get out there effectively. I'm slightly dubious about the online format part and the AI investment. And the only reason I say that is because of platforms similar to Google Ads and things like that, which for years and years and years they've said, and I might have even said this last week, but years and years and years have said, come to us and personalize. We can get it to the singular person and make it really personal to them. Just give us the information and we'll do the rest. And then all of a sudden it's we're using AI, so we don't need any of that now. Just tell us what you do and we'll sort it out. And it's yeah, proofs in the pudding.
Mhm.
And I would suggest on an individual organizational basis, and if it works for you, hey, who am I to argue? But I am very skeptical when larger organizations put money and your details into a black box
Oh, completely.
and get results. So that's the downside. The positive side is that we seem to be using the right platforms and the right media to communicate, and it's so refreshing to see our industry investing in that portion
Yeah.
of the sector really.
It's a modest increase, but I think again the Les Burnett and Will Davis report, which again we'll share a link to, as well as the Walk advertising one. The title of that was "Go Big or Go Home,"
Hmm.
and basically he's on a crusade, which seemingly based on the numbers, again modest increase, but it looks like we're listening. Was that you can't get away from the need to spend some money on advertising
Hmm.
and the effects that it brings. That this do less with more, rather do more with less attitude. Like it's hit it's hit the sort of base now. You can't do any more with that. Even with AI, even with other efficiencies, you can't get away from the fact that these things work in the way that they do. And yeah, if you want the business benefits, one of the examples that he uses is the somewhat diametric opposition of efficiency and effectiveness. That if you want to sort of, to your point, be hyper targeted and limit your spend, the best thing you can do is just stop spending altogether. You will have zero waste if you have zero spend. However, if you want the business benefits that come with visibility, then you are going to have to expect, and that's not to say be reckless and just throw money anywhere, but
Yeah.
within a reasonable degree. Yeah, you're going to have, if you want your brand to be seen by people, you need to pay to do that. And yeah, as I say, it's modest numbers, but it looks like people are listening. So let's watch this space and see if that continues.
Yeah, I agree. Uh, long may it continue as well, not just within advertising, but within marketing in general. Because as you know, and I know, and hopefully our listeners know, that it's an integral piece within construction. And if you get that right, you are in such a good place, because not many, I'm being bullish here, but not many organizations get it right.
Yeah.
So you'll have that step up. And if you want to get it right, go and see Ryan. He can help you out.
Well, no, let's not do that.
No.
No
We're not here for
adverts.
self promotion. We're not here for self promotion. But
No, no, no.
Adobe, if anyone's out there for a creative, no, I'm joking. I'm joking. Other platforms are available. Right, okay. It's on that bombshell. It's time to wrap it up. A key takeaway for this episode.
I'm going to go slightly broad with this, because we touched on a similar thing last week. There is so much good data out there that there just needs a little bit of keeping an eye on the headlines, of kind of keeping abreast of what people are saying. And we've accessed all of these reports for free. We've got this data for free. Obviously, subscribe to the podcast and we'll help to keep you up to date as well. But yeah, not an accident that we've our three headlines come from three different reports this week. All of that data exists to inform better decision making and to sort of keep one eye on what's coming down the track. Again, we've mentioned the spectre of the budget. It's coming as predicted on this podcast. The government are starting to pre-brief media as to what's coming. So it's your job to stay genned up on that and understand how that's going to affect your part of the industry and your part of the supply chain. So yeah, I think that's my one takeaway is yeah, it's a time investment rather than a financial one. But yeah, the information is there. Just yeah, keep on looking for it.
Yeah, mine would be similar in terms of investment, and that's, make sure you're investing in the right areas. Don't be afraid to do that, and that goes back to the the thread that is AI for this episode. And it's you don't have to go all in. You don't have to go guns blazing. You do need that foundational structure before you do those things. And I think that's my key takeaway. It's invest. It sounds like a slogan, doesn't it? Invest for the future. But what I mean by that is make sure that you have a plan for these types of skills and roles, which might not be apparent right now, but they will be defined in the future as integral to your business. So make sure you're doing that.
And Invest for the Future might be a very good title for this episode.
I'll see what I can do. We'll conjure something up, eh? Right, let's call it a score draw on that one.
See you next week.